Welcome to nanoTECH. We present bite-sized pieces of information to help you in your journey teaching and learning online. We want to provide you with valuable resources that are easily accessible and that any teacher can put into practice right away. Today, we're going to talk about relationships, which are the cornerstone of any effective learning environment. The learning intention: I'm learning about the value of student-teacher relationships and the maintenance of those relationships in online learning. Now, some of the things we're going to explore today: elements of teacher-student relationship, including teacher empathy, unconditional positive regard, genuineness, non-directivity, encouragement of critical thinking. We'll also look at peer-to-peer relationships, reaching the hard to teach, and finally discussing quality touch points. The first concept to think about is teacher empathy. How do students seek connections with you? In any learning environment, we know how important relationships are, but in a teaching and learning environment, when you're online, it becomes even more important for you to be conscientiously applying some of this in place. Some tips: you can begin a synchronous session with a positive affirmation. This could be a quote of the day, a joke, a cartoon, something to add the human factor to your relationship. You also have to make sure that you're available to your students, and this can take two forms. Be available emotionally and pedagogically to your students, but also literally be available to your students. Have dedicated time that you know your students can reach you. Unconditional positive regard. How will your students know that you care about them as individuals? You will establish relationships with every single student one-on-one, but how do they know that you actually care about them? More than just doing your job, more than just a name on a class list. Why don't you try and use what you know about students to personalize their experience? You can do this by having a survey at the beginning of the course or a discussion forum where students can talk freely. You'll get to know your students and use that information to share back with them. Sometimes the most effective way of doing that is through voice and through video feedback. So rather than just reading text on a page, they get to know you as an instructor. Genuineness. Thinking about yourself as a professional, as an educator, how will your students know you care about yourself as a professional? Project optimism. Be positive about what it is that you're doing. We all got into teaching and learning for some reason. Don't forget that now. Get that spark back somehow and share it with your students. Make it really clear that your online learning environment, it's a safe space for them. It's a place for them to learn about themselves, to learn about the world, and to learn about others. Be part of that learning journey with them. Non-directivity. How will your students know you hold their abilities in high regard? You have a lot of faith in your students. How can you prove this to them? Try having individual conversations with your students, whether that through a discussion forum or email or virtually on a Zoom call, a Skype, something like that. Have those individual conversations about what their strengths and what their goals are, as well as, of course, what areas of improvement they have. One way you can really get a lot of buy-in from your students is making sure that they're part of the decision making about what goes on in your course as a large group and also as individuals. Trust your students. Trust that they know what's best. Trust that they know how they can learn, and trust the ability for them to have a positive impact on your course. Encouragement of critical thinking. It's so important in all contexts, especially in an online environment. How are your students going to shift from a traditional emphasis on memory to critical thinking? There's ways that you can do this in every class, including online. Have discussions and reflection among peers. Have students hash things out in small groups. I also believe it's important to build choice and relevance into the assignments. Make the learning meaningful to the students. You'll establish that relationship and you'll have them hooked. Now, more than just interaction and relationship between teacher and student, you're going to have a class of peers. So they do pay attention to how you interact with each individual student. They watch you, they learn from you. So every step that you do, everything that you're doing online is being modeled for them. Negative interactions with students will cause negative peer-to-peer interactions. Watch your language, watch yourself, watch who you're calling out in a live session, watch what you're putting on the discussion board. Your kids are watching you. Do some small group instruction. Don't just do large group. Students need the opportunity to talk to each other and to exchange ideas. That's how they build their relationships with each other. And like I said, and I can't emphasize this enough, maintain a safe and respectful learning environment. Model that to the students through the choice of your language that you use. They'll model it back, and it will become a safe space. In any context, we have the hard to teach. How do we reach them? This comes right out of the distance learning playbook. Because educators don't feel successful with students they view as lower achieving, we subconsciously avoid contact with them. As social animals, we attempt to surround ourselves with people who make us feel good. Students who are not making gains make us feel like failures, so we detach ourselves even more. What this highlights to me is how important it is to reach the students that are hard to teach. It does take deliberate action to reach all learners. So, here are some tips and strategies. Every day, ask yourself, did I greet the student by name? Specifically, if they're joining you in a small group or in a virtual session. How many times did I use their name specifically? Did I ask that individual student a critical thinking question? Did I ask them a personal question? Did I pay them a compliment? And how many times throughout my interaction with that student did I provide some positivity? That is how you will establish and maintain that relationship. The last thing that we need to talk about are quality touch points. One of the big things that's different between online learning and a traditional face-to-face bricks and mortar is the lack of casual conversations in the hallway or at the cafeteria. It's just not possible. You have to be intentional with how you reach out to your students. You know, if you're on a website, you don't have an ad blocker and you get a little pop-up that's right in your face, how can we use that to our advantage? Well, we're going to call it pop-up pedagogy. So make sure that your kids are thinking about your class even when you're not in front of them. This is a great tool that you can use with your students and with parents as well. Ask yourself these questions. How will you call on students? What technologies are you going to use? How are you going to notice who hasn't participated so you can re-engage them? What will you need to be mindful of to create more discussion opportunities during live virtual sessions? How will you be a presence on your discussion boards? What is your pop-up pedagogy plan to stay connected with students when you are not in a live session? And what's your pop-up pedagogy plan to stay connected with families? Are you sending regular emails? Are you checking in large groups? Are you checking in one-on-one? Lots of tools, lots of techniques to do this, but it's all so important to establishing and maintaining that relationship. Some of the best resources that I've found have come out of the distance learning playbook. It's a couple links to articles here as well, including a from the Faculty Focus, something that was just published this previous fall. Relationships are the cornerstone of the work that we do. Without that relationship, your students aren't going to be engaged. And without that engagement, they're not going to be successful. Thank you so much for spending these few minutes with me as we explore the importance of relationships in teaching and learning online. Take good care. Thank you.